Hey friends, welcome back to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. I'm your host, Dr. Natasha Guess, founder of Guess Compliance Consultant LLC, where I work with small and mid-sized healthcare teams to build compliance systems that actually function in real operational environments. Now, we're 6 episodes into our Compliance in the Workflow series, and today we're tackling one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of healthcare compliance. What is actually a breach? Now, I do want to start with something I hear constantly from practice managers and operations leads. Something happened, and we're pretty sure it's not a big deal. We handled it, and we don't think we need to report anything. And sometimes they're actually right. Not every incident is a reportable breach. But here's the part that most organizations or practices get wrong. Whether or not something is a reportable breach is not a judgment call. It's not an instinct. It's not something you decide based on how quickly the situation was resolved or how minor it seemed in that moment. It's a documented, structured legal determination. And it's required regardless of how the assessment itself concludes. Now, I want to walk you through what HIPAA actually says about this. Under the HIPAA breach notification rule, a breach is defined as an impermissible use or disclosure of PHI that compromises the security or privacy of that information. This is what HIPAA says. That definition is broader than most people realize. It's not limited to cyber attacks. It's not limited to large-scale data exposures. It includes any impermissible use or disclosure. For example, a fax sent to the wrong number, an email forwarded to the wrong recipient, a conversation about a patient held in a space where it could be overheard, or a record accessed without a documented business purpose. Each of those situations can constitute a breach depending on the circumstances. And here is the part that changes everything. HIPAA presumes a breach occurred unless the practice can demonstrate a low probability that the PHI was actually compromised. Hear that again. HIPAA presumes the breach. The practice does not get to assume it was fine. The practice or organization must demonstrate through a documented 4-factor risk assessment that there's a low probability the information was compromised. If your practice cannot make that demonstration, notification obligations are triggered. Let me use a scenario to show you how this plays out. A staff member sends a fax containing patient information to the wrong provider. It's a simple mistake. The fax is retrieved quickly, and the situation feels resolved. What I found is that most practices in this situation would just move on. The fax was retrieved. Nobody seems to have been harmed, and it feels like it does not rise to the level of a reportable breach. But here is what HIPAA requires. The practice must conduct and document a 4-factor risk assessment. They must evaluate the nature and extent of the PHI in the fax. They must assess who the unauthorized recipient was and whether that person had the ability to retain or use the information. And they must determine whether the information was actually acquired or viewed before it was retrieved. And they must document whatever mitigation steps were taken. If your assessment demonstrates a low probability that the information was compromised, The practice may conclude that notification is not required, but that conclusion must be documented. The assessment itself must be documented, and that documentation must be retained. The facts getting retrieved quickly doesn't eliminate the obligation to assess and document. It may inform the outcome of the assessment, but it does not replace it. Let me zoom out and talk about what most breaches actually look like. Because the scenario I just described is not an exception, it is the rule. Most breaches don't begin as dramatic events. They don't begin with a cyber attack or a stolen device or even a deliberate violation. They begin as ordinary operational moments that didn't have the right structure around them. An access decision made casually because the workflow was unclear. You may have a text message sent because the secure channel felt inconvenient. A vendor may be added to a system without the proper agreements in place. And you may have a policy that no longer matches the workflow it was written to describe. Individually, these moments may appear minor. But when an incident occurs, regulators don't evaluate that moment in isolation. They evaluate the surrounding structure. Meaning, was access properly limited? Was communication transmitted through secure channels? Were your vendor agreements in place and current? Did the policy reflect the actual workflow? And was there a documented response when the incident was discovered? The incident itself surfaces the structure or the lack of it. And what regulators find when they look at the surrounding structure is what determines the outcome. And I know many of you may say, well, what does the right structure look like for incident response? It starts with clarity about what constitutes a potential incident. Every team member should know that their job is not to determine whether something is serious. It's not. Their job is to report it. The determination of whether it rises to the level of a reportable breach is made through the assessment process, not through an individual's judgment in that moment. It then continues with a clear escalation pathway. When something potentially inappropriate happens, staff should know exactly what to do and who to tell. Not approximately, exactly. The escalation pathway should be documented, communicated, and practiced. And it requires a documentation habit. Every potential incident gets documented. The assessment gets documented. The conclusion gets documented. The corrective actions get documented. And not because regulators are watching in that moment, but because documentation is what protects the practice if they ever do watch. Here is what I want you to take away from this episode. Yes, not every incident is a reportable breach, but every potential incident requires a documented assessment. The assessment process is not optional, and the documentation of that process is what protects your practice when questions are asked. Silence always increases exposure. Process reduces it. Now, in the next episode, we are going to walk through the 5-step incident response framework, and we'll do so step by step. We are going to talk about exactly what to do from the moment something potentially inappropriate happens, through resolution and documentation. I am Dr. Natasha Guess. Thank you for listening to Guess What? Compliance Can Be Simple. Now, if today's episode raised any questions about how your organization or practice currently handles potential incidents, I would love to help you build a response framework that actually works in your day-to-day operation. You can schedule a complimentary compliance strategy call using the link in the show notes. Now, see you in the next episode. Until next time, remember to keep it simple, stay compliant, and protect your patients.